The room is silent, but your mind is loud. It is a specific kind of noise, a low-frequency hum of contingency. You are sitting at a desk, or perhaps you are walking through the early morning fog of a city that hasn't quite woken up yet, and you are thinking about your future. You have a goal. It is a significant goal, one that requires your full attention, your resources, and your time. But tucked away in the back of your mind, like a folded piece of paper in a hidden pocket, is an exit strategy. You call it Plan B. You tell yourself it is the mark of a responsible adult. You tell yourself that only the reckless leap without a net. You believe that by having a backup, you are protecting yourself from the sting of failure. But what if the very existence of that net is the reason? You haven't yet reached the heights you are capable of. In the world of high-stakes psychology and strategic execution, there is a phenomenon that often goes unnamed but is felt by every person who has ever attempted something great. It is the dilution of intent. When you create a secondary path, you do not simply add a safety measure. You split your cognitive resources. You divide your psychological intensity. You are no longer a single-minded force moving toward a primary objective. You are a person looking over their shoulder, wondering if the other path might be easier if the current one gets too steep. This internal division is subtle. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It whispers when the work gets difficult at 2 a.m. It whispers when the market fluctuates. It whispers when you face your first real rejection. It says, it's okay, we have another way out. This audiobook is not an invitation to recklessness. It is an exploration of the profound psychological shift that occurs when a human being decides that there is only one way forward. It is about the transition from a state of trying to a state of becoming. When you burn your Plan B, you are not engaging in a dramatic, chaotic act of self-destruction. You are performing a calculated, strategic removal of the psychological out that keeps you tethered to mediocrity. You are deciding to increase the likelihood of your success by making failure too costly to entertain. Think about the architecture of your current life. How many of your daily actions are fueled by a genuine commitment to your primary vision? And how many are merely maintenance for your safety net? We often spend 50% of our energy building a dream, and the other 50% making sure we have a soft place to land if that dream fails. The result is predictable. We end up with a half-built dream and a very comfortable place to stay while we regret it. The human brain is an ancient, sophisticated survival machine. Its primary function is not to make you successful. Its primary function is to keep you safe. Safe means predictable. Safe means low risk. Safe means the status quo. When you present your brain with a high-risk, high-reward path, it immediately begins scanning for exits. If it finds one, it will orient your behavior toward that exit the moment things become uncomfortable. This is why most people quit just before a breakthrough. The discomfort of growth triggers the survival mechanism, and the survival mechanism sees Plan B as the solution to that discomfort. To force your success is not about aggression or hostility toward others. It is about the internal discipline of forcing your own focus. It is about creating a psychological environment where your only options are to adapt, evolve, and prevail. When the exit is sealed, the mind stops looking for a way out and starts looking for a way through. It is a shift from passive observation to active problem solving. It is the difference between a person who is testing the water and a person who has already dived into the center of the lake. In the chapters that follow, we will deconstruct the layers of this commitment. We will look at why the safety net is often a psychological trap. We will examine the cognitive science of focus and how the presence of alternatives degrades our ability to perform at a high level. We will explore the ethics of this commitment, how being fully dedicated to a path allows you to show up more effectively for others, with more integrity and less resentment. We are moving away from the culture of maybe. We are moving away from the hesitancy that characterizes the modern professional landscape. You have likely noticed that the world, with people WAO, are exploring their options. These are people WUO spend years in a state of perpetual preparation, never quite committing to a single trajectory. They are waiting for a certainty that will never come. They are waiting for a sign that their path is guaranteed. But in the real world, probability is all we have. And the highest probability of success belongs to the individual WHO has aligned their entire being with a single objective. This is a calm process. It does not require a raised voice or a frantic pace. It requires a cold, clear-eyed assessment of what you actually want. If you truly want the life you say you want, you must eventually ask yourself, why am I still holding onto the door handle? When you let go of the handle, the room changes. The air feels different. The stakes become real. This reality is not something to be feared. It is something to be harnessed. Total commitment acts as a filter. It filters out the trivial. It filters out the distractions. It filters out the people who are only with you for the easy parts of the journey. When you burn the bridge behind you, you find a level of clarity that is unavailable to those who are still looking back at the shore. Throughout this experience, we will focus on the concept of strategic singularity. This is the state where your thoughts, your actions, and your environment are all pointing in the same direction. We will learn how to identify the subtle plan BS that we hide from ourselves, the small compromises, the just-in-case habits, and the social circles that provide us with excuses for our lack of progress. We are going to reframe the way you view risk. Risk is not the enemy of success, the mismanagement of focus is. By maintaining a backup plan, you are actually increasing your risk. The risk of a life lived at half capacity. The risk of never knowing what you are truly capable of. The risk of reaching the end and realizing that your safety net was actually a shroud. This is a journey toward professional and personal mastery. It is about learning to trust your own ability to solve problems in real time. It is about the realization that you do not need a backup plan. When you have a functioning mind and a disciplined will, you are the plan. Your ability to observe, adjust, and execute is the only security you will ever truly have. As we move forward, I want you to consider one question. If failure was no longer an option you were willing to entertain, not because it's impossible, but because you've removed the infrastructure that supports it, how would you walk into your office tomorrow? How would you speak to your partners? How would you manage your time? The answer to that question is the person you are about to become. Success is not a matter of luck, and it is rarely a matter of raw talent alone. It is a matter of psychological positioning. It is about placing yourself in a situation where the only way to find comfort again is to achieve the objective. This is how the most significant human achievements have been realized. Not by people who had every contingency mapped out, but by people who were so committed to a vision that they lost the ability to see the exits. Prepare yourself. We are going to strip away the illusions of safety. We are going to look at the raw mechanics of achievement. We are going to learn how to stand in the center of the storm with a calm heart, knowing that we cannot turn back. The fire is already lit. The bridges are beginning to smolder. Do not look back. The only thing behind you is a version of yourself that was too afraid to be great. The only thing ahead of you is the path you were meant to forge. In this space, we do not hope for success. We do not wish for it. We do not wait for it to be granted to us by external forces. We create the conditions where success becomes the most probable outcome of our existence. We do this with precision. We do this with patience. And we do it by burning every bridge that leads back to where we started. Take a breath. Let the weight of your backup plans start to feel heavy. Notice how they pull at your shoulders. Notice how they cloud your vision. Now imagine them gone. Imagine the lightness of having only one direction. Imagine the power of a mind that is no longer divided. We are ready to begin. Wait for the silence to settle. Let the noise of the world fade. Focus on the singular path ahead. The psychology of the exit door. There is a door at the back of almost every room you have ever worked in. You may not have noticed it consciously, but your mind has. Your mind found it the moment you walked in. It catalogued its location, noted the distance between you and the handle, and filed that information away in the part of your brain responsible for survival. This is not a character flaw. This is not a sign of weakness. This is the oldest operating system in the human experience, running exactly as it was designed to run. The problem is not that the system exists. The problem is that most people allow a survival mechanism designed for physical danger to govern the decisions of their professional and personal lives indefinitely. And the result is a life lived in permanent proximity to the exit door, never quite moving toward the center of the room. In the field of behavioral psychology, researchers have long studied what happens to human performance when alternative options are readily available. The findings are consistent and, when you understand them, deeply clarifying. The presence of alternatives does not simply provide comfort. It actively changes the way the brain allocates its resources. When your mind knows there is another option, it holds back, not dramatically, not in a way that is immediately obvious. It holds back in the way that water finds cracks in concrete, silently, persistently, and with extraordinary effectiveness. You do not notice the leakage until you look at the structure years later and wonder why it is no longer holding together the way it should. This psychological phenomenon has been studied in contexts ranging from athletic performance to entrepreneurial success to academic achievement. When participants in controlled studies were given a primary task but also made aware of a fallback option, their engagement with the primary task consistently decreased. Their problem-solving effort decreased. Their tolerance for discomfort, which is one of the most critical ingredients in any form of mastery, decreased significantly. This is not a theory. This is observable human behavior, and it is playing out in your life in ways you may have never fully recognized until now. Consider for a moment how Plan B actually functions in the mind. On the surface, it appears to function as insurance, but psychologically it functions as permission. It is a pre-issued license to stop pushing when things become sufficiently uncomfortable. Every human being has a discomfort threshold, a point at which the cost of continuing feels greater than the cost of stopping. Under normal circumstances, when a person is fully committed to a single path, they reach that threshold and are forced to innovate. They are forced to find a way through because there is no way around. But when Plan B exists, the threshold is triggered and the decision has already been made. The mind doesn't need to solve the problem. It only needs to walk to the back of the room and open the door. Now, here is where the understanding becomes more nuanced. This is not about eliminating prudent preparation. There is a critical distinction between strategic contingency planning, which is a form of professional intelligence, and psychological exit strategy, which is a form of unconscious self-limitation. A contingency plan says, if variable X changes, here is how I adapt my approach to remain on the same primary path. A psychological plan B says, if this becomes too difficult, here is a completely different life I am prepared to accept. One is a tool of flexibility within commitment. The other is a softening of commitment itself. We are dealing with the second category. We are examining the version of Plan B that lives in the emotional architecture of your identity and tells you, in quiet moments of doubt, that you are not fully required to succeed at this particular thing. The exit door does something else that is rarely discussed. It changes the way you communicate. When you are not fully committed to an outcome, other people sense it. This is not mystical perception. It is the ordinary human capacity to read behavioral signals. Your tone carries hesitation. Your decisions reflect a person who is managing risk rather than seizing opportunity. Your leadership, if you are in a leadership position, projects a kind of managed caution that others interpret as a lack of conviction. And in almost every domain of human endeavor, conviction is contagious. Its absence is equally so. The people around you, partners, colleagues, investors, clients, collaborators, are constantly reading the signals you emit. When those signals indicate that you are not entirely certain this is where you belong, they begin to make their own quiet calculations about how much to invest in you. This is why the decision to burn the Plan B is not merely a personal act of psychological discipline. It is a social act with real-world consequences. Full commitment tends to change the way you are perceived. It changes the rooms you are invited into. It changes the conversations that are initiated with you. A person who has clearly decided that they are going all the way down a particular path radiates a kind of gravitational certainty that tends to attract the resources, the relationships, and opportunities that accelerate their trajectory. Let us now look at the anatomy of a typical Plan B and how it forms in the first place. Most Plan Bs are not designed consciously. Very few people sit down and deliberately construct an alternate life. They develop gradually through accumulated small decisions. A professional begins a business but keeps their employment contract active just in case. They tell themselves it is practical, and perhaps for a short period it is, but months pass and the contract is still active, and the business is still not receiving the full attention it needs, because the full attention is divided. A person begins a creative career, but continues to tell others they are exploring it rather than doing it, because the language of exploration does not require the same level of accountability. The language of commitment. A person in a significant relationship continues to emotionally hold other options open, never quite allowing full vulnerability, because the exit door is cracked and the cool air from the corridor of alternatives keeps them from being fully present in the room. In each of these cases, the Plan B feels like safety, but its actual function is to delay the reckoning. It is to postpone the moment where you must stand in front of your primary objective and say, I am giving this everything, and I am going to find out whether I can do it. That moment of reckoning is uncomfortable. It is vulnerable, but it is the most honest moment available to a committed human being. It is the moment where real development begins. There is a concept in cognitive psychology known as psychological ownership. The degree to which you feel that an outcome belongs to you, that you are responsible for it, that it is an extension of your identity, directly influences the effort you invest in it. When Plan B is present, psychological ownership of Plan A is diluted. You are the partial owner of a primary goal and the tentative owner of a secondary one. Neither receives the full force of your identity. But when Plan B is removed, the psychological ownership of Plan A becomes total. The goal becomes yours in a complete way. Its success or failure is your success or failure, And this is not a burden to be feared, it is a force to be leveraged. Total psychological ownership activates a depth of engagement that partial ownership simply cannot access. This engagement manifests in practical ways. You begin to notice resources and opportunities that were always present but previously invisible because your attention was divided. You begin to solve problems with greater creativity because your mind is no longer allocating cognitive bandwidth to maintaining the fallback position. Your decision-making becomes faster and more accurate because each decision is now evaluated solely on the basis of its contribution to the primary objective. You stop asking, will this work out enough that I don't need to fall back? You start asking, what is the best possible next move from where I am standing right now? This is the psychology of the person who has closed the exit door, not because they are reckless, not because they are blind to the realities of uncertainty, but because they have made a deliberate, informed choice to experience the full weight and full reward of singular commitment. They have chosen to find out exactly what they are made of, not by placing themselves in a comfortable observation deck above the action, but by stepping fully into the arena and letting the door close behind them. The exit door will always exist architecturally. It is built into every situation. What you are choosing to do is to stop looking at it, to stop measuring the distance between where you stand and where it stands, to orient your entire body, your entire mind, and your entire behavioral pattern toward the far wall, the one with no door, only the horizon of your objective. That is where we are going, and the only way to get there is to stop managing your retreat. The architecture of total commitment. There is a particular kind of person you have likely encountered at some point in your life. They are not always the loudest person in the room. They are not always the most talented, the most educated, or the most well-connected. But there is something about them that is unmistakable. It is a quality of presence that communicates, without a single word being spoken, that this person has made a decision, a complete decision, not a provisional one, not a conditional one. A decision that has settled into their bones and reorganized the way they move through the world. You have likely felt the weight of their focus when they speak to you. You have likely noticed that their attention, when it is directed at something, is not a casual glance but a sustained, deliberate gaze. These are people who have, whether they articulate it this way or not, committed to a singular architecture of purpose. And that architecture changes everything about how they operate. Total commitment is not an emotional state. This is one of the most important distinctions we need to establish early in this conversation. Many people confuse commitment with enthusiasm and enthusiasm with sustainability. Enthusiasm is a feeling. It is valuable, but it is inherently temporary. It rises and falls with circumstances. It peaks when things go well and collapses under the first serious wave of resistance. Total commitment, on the other hand, is a structural decision. It is a choice made at the level of identity, not at the level of mood. It says, regardless of how I feel on any given morning, regardless of whether the results are visible yet, regardless of whether the people around me believe in what I am doing, I am continuing, not out of stubbornness, not out of ego, but because I have examined my direction with clarity, confirmed its alignment with my deepest values, and chosen it fully. Understanding this distinction matters because it changes the way you manage the inevitable difficult periods. When commitment is emotional, the first prolonged period of difficulty can feel like evidence that the commitment was wrong. The reasoning goes, I feel terrible, I am not seeing results, therefore this must be the wrong path. But when commitment is structural, when it is built into your identity rather than your mood, difficult period is interpreted differently. It is interpreted as a data point, not a verdict. It is information about what needs to be adjusted, not a signal to retreat. The structurally committed person asks, what does this difficulty require of me? The emotionally committed person asks, is this difficulty a sign that I should stop? The architecture of total commitment is built on 4 foundational pillars. Each one is necessary. The absence of any one of them creates a structure that appears solid on the surface but is vulnerable to collapse under sustained pressure. Let us examine each pillar with the attention it deserves. The first pillar is clarity of direction. This sounds straightforward, but genuine clarity is rarer than most people acknowledge. Many people believe they have clarity because they can describe their goal in general terms. They can say, I want to build a successful company. I want to reach the peak of my profession. I want to create financial independence. But these are categories, not coordinates. Real clarity of direction means you know specifically what you are building, why that particular thing matters to you at a deep level, what it will require of you in terms of sacrifice and sustained. effort, and what the indicators of genuine progress look like. Without this level of specificity, your commitment has no real object. You are committed to a concept, not a destination, and commitment to a concept tends to dissolve the moment the concept becomes inconvenient. To build genuine clarity, you must be willing to do something that most people actively avoid. You must sit with your goals in silence and interrogate them. You must ask yourself not just what you want, but why you want it at this particular level of intensity. You must be honest about whether the goal is truly yours, born from your own values and vision, or whether it is a goal you have absorbed from external sources. A goal that belongs to you, at the level of identity, will sustain your effort when circumstances are difficult. A goal that belongs to your environment, adopted from family expectations, cultural pressure, or social comparison, tends to lose its motivating force precisely when conditions become most demanding, because it was never truly rooted in you. The second pillar is resource alignment. Total commitment is not merely a psychological posture. It must be expressed in the tangible allocation of your resources. Your time is a resource. Your attention is a resource. Your financial choices are resources. Your social environment is a resource. The architecture of total commitment requires that these resources be oriented, as much as is practically possible, toward your primary objective. This does not mean the immediate and complete elimination of everything else in your life. That would be neither realistic nor healthy. But it does mean conducting an honest audit of where your resources are currently flowing and asking, with genuine rigor, how much of what you are doing each day is genuinely contributing to the direction you say you are committed to. Most people discover, when they conduct this audit with real honesty, that the gap between stated commitment and actual resource allocation is significant. They find that hours are being spent in activities that feel productive but are actually maintenance behaviors for their plan B. They find that financial resources are being held back from the primary objective in ways that subtly communicate a lack of full belief in it. They find that their social environment, the people with whom they spend the most time, is largely populated by individuals who are themselves operating at the level of managed caution rather than total commitment. And this is not about judging those individuals. It is about recognizing that your environment is a powerful shaping force, and that the architecture of your commitment must include an honest assessment of whether that environment is supporting or softening your trajectory. The third pillar is behavioral consistency. This is where commitment becomes visible. It is easy to declare commitment in a moment of inspiration. The declaration in that moment feels real, it feels powerful, but commitment is not measured in declarations. It is measured in the thousands of small behavioral choices that follow the declaration, in the choices made on ordinary days, on difficult days, on the days when no one is watching and the results are not yet visible. Behavioral consistency is the daily expression of your structural commitment. It is the practice of acting in alignment with your stated direction even when the emotional fuel is low. This is why the development of disciplined routine is not, as it is sometimes characterized, a restriction of freedom. It is the operational infrastructure of freedom. When your behaviors are consistent, your results tend to become more predictable. When your results become more predictable, your confidence in your direction increases. When your confidence increases, your commitment deepens. This is a reinforcing cycle, and it begins with the seemingly mundane act of doing the work on the days when you do not feel like doing it. The fourth pillar is identity integration. This is perhaps the most subtle and most powerful of the four. It is the process by which your goal is no longer something you are pursuing, but something you are becoming. There is a profound psychological shift that occurs when a person stops identifying as someone WAO wants to be a particular thing and begins identifying as someone WO is that thing at the level of trajectory and commitment. This is not a delusional self-perception. It is a forward-oriented identity construction that tends to produce the behaviors consistent with its realization. When you identify as a person WHO is already on the path, not at the destination, but fully and irreversibly on the path, your behavioral choices are filtered through that identity. You ask with much greater frequency and much greater force,
does this action align with WO I am? The person WO has integrated their commitment into their identity finds that the question of
whether to continue is rarely asked. It has already been answered at a level deeper than daily deliberation. These four pillars, clarity, resource alignment, behavioral consistency, and identity integration, form the complete architecture of total commitment. They work together as a system. Clarity without resource alignment is a beautiful vision with no engine. Resource alignment without clarity is energy spent in an undetermined direction. Behavioral consistency without identity integration is discipline that is vulnerable to exhaustion, and identity integration without the other three is self-concept without substance. When all four are present and functioning, something remarkable tends to happen. The external world begins to respond differently to your presence. Not because of any mysterious force, but because your actions, your communication, your decisions, and your use of time all begin to broadcast a coherent signal. People who can add value to your direction recognize you as someone worth engaging with seriously. Opportunities that were always present in your environment begin to surface because you are now oriented to perceive them. The architecture of your commitment reshapes your perception of what is possible and what is available, not by changing the world, but by changing the lens through which you observe it. This is the power of building well, not just dreaming well, not just intending well, but constructing, with deliberate care and strategic intelligence, the internal architecture that makes total commitment not a temporary state of heightened motivation but a permanent operating condition. The exit door is still there, but when the architecture of your commitment is solid, you stop noticing it. Not because you are in denial, but because you are fully occupied with something far more compelling, the room ahead of you, and everything it is about to become. The cost of keeping the door open. Most people never calculate the real price of their backup plan. They see it as free. They see it as a neutral object sitting quietly in the corner of their professional life, costing nothing, requiring nothing, simply existing as a form of benign insurance. But nothing in the economy of human attention and human energy is truly free. Everything you hold onto has a carrying cost. Everything you maintain requires a portion of your cognitive, emotional, and behavioral resources to sustain it. And the backup plan, precisely because it is emotional rather than physical, has a carrying cost that is invisible on the surface but devastating in its cumulative effect. Today we are going to calculate that cost with complete honesty, not to create anxiety, not to generate regret about the past, but to build the kind of clear-eyed understanding that makes the decision to release the backup plan feel not like a loss, but like the most intelligent financial decision you have ever made about the currency of your own potential. Let us begin with the cost that is perhaps the most significant and the least discussed. It is the cost of divided attention, and it operates at a level of subtlety that makes it difficult to detect until you have experienced what its absence feels like. The human mind, despite its extraordinary complexity and capacity, is not designed for genuine simultaneous high-performance processing across multiple competing priorities. This is not a limitation to be ashamed of. It is simply the reality of how focused cognition operates. When your deepest professional and personal energies are distributed across a primary path and a backup path, neither path receives the quality of attention that either one requires for exceptional outcomes. What you experience instead is a kind of cognitive blurring, a state where both directions feel somewhat real and somewhat uncertain, where your thinking about your primary goal is perpetually colored by the awareness of the alternative, and where your relationship with both paths is characterized by a low-level ambivalence that prevents the depth of engagement necessary for mastery. This divided attention manifests in ways that are easy to misattribute. You might notice that your problem-solving feels slower than it should. You might find that your creative thinking around your primary objective feels constrained, as though there is an invisible ceiling on how far you are willing to let your imagination run with it. You might observe that when you encounter a significant obstacle, your first instinct is to assess it in terms of whether it is a reason to reconsider your direction, rather than a challenge to be solved within your current direction. All of these are symptoms of a mind that is managing two realities simultaneously, and the management of two realities is exhausting in a way that is difficult to articulate but immediately recognizable once named. There is also the cost to your decision-making quality. Every significant path requires you to make decisions under conditions of incomplete information and genuine uncertainty. This is not a flaw in the process, it is the nature of the process. Effective decision-making under uncertainty requires a clear primary criterion, a reference point against which options are evaluated. When your commitment is total, that reference point is stable. Does this option advance my primary objective? The answer to that question organizes your thinking and produces decisions with a high degree of internal coherence. But when Plan B is present, the decision-making framework becomes unstable. Every significant choice must now be evaluated against two reference points. Does it advance Plan A? Does it compromise Plan B? Does it foreclose options that might be needed if Plan A fails? This triangulation is cognitively expensive and tends to produce decisions that are hedged, delayed, and optimized for safety rather than for progress. The hedged decision is one of the most underestimated obstacles to exceptional outcomes. A hedged decision is one that is designed to be partially reversible to advance the primary goal while leaving enough room to retreat if necessary. On the surface, this sounds prudent. In practice, it tends to produce outcomes that are insufficient for either direction. The half investment that cannot generate the momentum required for breakthrough in the primary path, and the continued holding of position in the backup path that prevents genuine commitment to the alternative if it is ever genuinely needed. Hedged decisions accumulate into a hedged life, a life that is technically safe but experientially hollow, because it has never fully belonged to any single direction. Now let us examine the emotional cost, which is perhaps the most personally significant. There is a particular form of low-grade psychological tension that is produced by living in a state of unresolved commitment. It is not acute distress. It does not feel like a crisis. It feels more like a persistent background noise, a quiet dissatisfaction that colors your experience of both the successes and the difficulties of your current path. When things go well on your primary path, the celebration is muted by the awareness that you are not fully in. When things go poorly, the difficulty is amplified by the presence of the exit, because the existence of the exit makes staying feel like a choice that needs to be continuously re-justified rather than a commitment that has already been made. This ongoing re-justification is psychologically exhausting in a way that compounds over time. Every morning, at some level of awareness, the person with an active plan B is making the decision to continue with plan A again. Not because it has been newly chosen, but because it has never been fully chosen. Each day requires a fresh allocation of willpower to the question of whether to stay on the primary path. And willpower, as behavioral research consistently demonstrates, is a finite daily resource. The energy spent on the repeated micro-decision to continue is energy that is unavailable for the actual work of continuing. Over months and years, this quiet drain accumulates into a significant deficit. A deficit that often explains the gap between a person's demonstrated capability in low-stakes situations and their actual performance under the sustained pressure of long-term commitment. There is also the cost to your relationships, both personal and professional. When you are not fully committed to your direction, the people WHO are closely connected to your journey sense it, even when they cannot articulate what they are sensing. Partners, collaborators, and mentors WHO are themselves fully committed to their paths tend to calibrate their investment in you based on the signal your commitment broadcasts. A person WHO is fully in tends to attract, others WHO are fully in. A person WHO is managing their exit tends to attract or retain, others WHO are similarly managing theirs. And a team or a partnership composed of people WHO are all privately managing their exits is a fundamentally fragile structure. It may function well under favorable conditions, but under pressure, which is precisely when full commitment matters most, the individual exit strategies activate and the collective endeavor loses the cohesion it needs to navigate difficulty. In your personal relationships, the cost of keeping the door open manifests differently but with equal significance. When you are not fully committed to your professional direction, you carry a particular kind of unresolved tension into your personal life. The people WHO care about you most are often the inadvertent recipients of the emotional residue of your professional ambivalence, the frustration that is not quite named, the restlessness that appears without clear cause, the distracted presence that makes you physically available but psychologically elsewhere. These are the relational costs of an unresolved commitment, and they are real costs paid by real people. WHO deserve the fullest version of you. Let us also consider the cost to your self-concept. Over time, the maintenance of a backup plan tends to communicate something to your own mind about what you genuinely believe about your ability to succeed on the primary path. At a level beneath conscious reasoning, the continued existence of Plan B is a signal from you to you. It says, I am not certain I can do this, and while uncertainty is a universal and honest part of any significant undertaking, the act of building an infrastructure around that uncertainty, translating it into a maintained alternative path, deepens it. It moves uncertainty from an emotional state that can be worked through to a structural feature of your situation that is reinforced daily. The backup plan over time becomes evidence of your own doubt, and you become the most persuasive recipient of that evidence. This is why so many people with exceptional talent and genuine potential spend years on the periphery of what they are capable of. It is not a lack of ability, it is not a lack of opportunity. It is the slow, quiet erosion of self-belief that is produced by the daily maintenance of an alternative to their primary vision. They have inadvertently constructed a system that perpetually reminds them that they might fail, that the failure is anticipated, and that the anticipation has been so thorough that an entire secondary life has been prepared to receive them when it occurs. The cost of keeping the door open is not paid in a single large transaction, it is paid in 1,000 small ones, in the slightly hedged decision, in the divided mourning, in the muted celebration, in the distracted conversation, in the quietly eroded self-belief, in the partnerships that never quite reach their full depth, in the work that is very good but never quite extraordinary, because extraordinary requires everything, and everything has not been available because a portion of it has always been allocated to. Maintaining the door, when you understand the full ledger, when you see not just what the backup plan offers in terms of apparent security but what it costs in terms of real performance, real relationships and real identity, the calculation changes. The backup plan stops looking like a free asset and starts looking like what it actually is, the most expensive item in your professional portfolio. And the most liberating decision you can make is to stop paying for it. The moment of severance there is a moment that exists in the life of every person who has ever achieved something that genuinely mattered to them. It is not the moment of achievement itself. It is not the public celebration, the financial milestone, or the external recognition that confirms the arrival. It is a quitter moment, and it comes earlier. It comes at the point where a person looks at the life they have been carefully maintaining as a contingency and makes the decision with full awareness of what that decision means to release it, to stop funding it emotionally, to stop keeping it warm and accessible in the background of their primary existence. This moment is not dramatic in the way that movies portray transformation. It is often intensely private. It can happen in a car, in the early hours of a morning, in the middle of a conversation that suddenly clarifies everything, but its effects are seismic. Because once that moment has passed, once the release has been made, with genuine intention and clarity, the entire internal landscape reorganizes, and the person walks out of that moment is structurally different from the person walked into it. We are going to examine this moment with precision, not to romanticize it, but to understand it well enough that when it arrives for you, or when you choose to create it deliberately, you are prepared to move through it with the clarity and the courage it requires. The first thing to understand about the moment of severance is that it is almost always preceded by a period of heightened discomfort. This is not coincidental. The discomfort is the signal. It is the internal pressure that builds when the gap between where you are and where you know you need to be becomes too wide to ignore comfortably. Many people experience this pressure and misinterpret it as a sign that something is wrong with their primary path. They feel the tension and conclude that the tension is evidence of a mistake. They reach for the backup plan, not because the primary path has genuinely failed, but because the discomfort of partial commitment has become unsustainable. They are trying to relieve the pressure, but the pressure is not telling them to stop. The pressure is telling them to choose. This distinction is critical. The discomfort that precedes genuine commitment is not the same as the discomfort that signals genuine misalignment. Learning to distinguish between the two is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop in the management of their own trajectory. Misalignment discomfort has a specific quality. It is a persistent, values-based resistance to the direction itself, a deep sense that the path fundamentally contradicts who you are and what you genuinely care about. Commitment discomfort, on the other hand, has a different quality. It is the tension produced by the gap between declared intention and actual behavioral investment. It is the internal friction of a person who knows they are capable of more than they are currently giving. It is the feeling of a mind that is pressing against the ceiling of its own partially committed effort. When you learn to recognize commitment discomfort for what it is, it stops being a warning and becomes an invitation. It is your own psychological system telling you that partial engagement is no longer sufficient, that the time for managed involvement has passed, that the moment of severance is available and waiting for you to step into it. Now let us talk about what the moment of severance actually requires, because it is not simply an internal declaration. An internal declaration without behavioral expression is not severance, it is intention. And intention, while necessary, is insufficient on its own. The moment of severance must be expressed in the real world through specific, concrete actions that make the release of Plan B tangible and irreversible. The nature of these actions will differ depending on your specific situation, but the principle is consistent. The release must be real enough that it changes your actual circumstances, not merely your internal narrative. For some people, this means formally closing a professional door that has been kept ajar. ending the contract, declining the offer, giving up the position. For others, it means restructuring the financial arrangement that has been serving as the economic foundation of the backup plan. For others still, it means having a direct and honest conversation with someone in their life, a partner, a family member, a mentor, about the decision they have made and what it means for the shared landscape of their future. For others, it means making a public commitment of some form that raises the social stakes of their direction and makes retreat more costly than continuation. Each of these actions serves the same fundamental purpose. They create an external reality that reflects and reinforces the internal decision. They make the commitment real in the world, not just in the mind. And this external reality then feeds back into the internal experience, deepening the commitment through the very act of having expressed it. This is the feedback loop of total commitment: internal decision expressed in external action, which reinforces internal conviction, which generates stronger external action. Once initiated, this loop has a momentum that is genuinely self-sustaining. There is something else that happens in the moment of severance that is worth examining carefully. When the backup plan is released, a specific form of cognitive clarity emerges that was previously unavailable. It is the clarity of a mind that no longer needs to maintain two parallel models of its own future. The cognitive resources that were allocated to tracking, maintaining, and updating the backup plan become available for the primary path. This reallocation is not trivial. For many people, it represents a significant increase in the mental bandwidth available for creative thinking, strategic planning, and high-quality problem-solving in their primary direction. Ideas that previously felt just out of reach begin to surface with greater frequency. Solutions to persistent problems begin to emerge from angles that were previously overlooked. The thinking becomes sharper, not because intelligence has increased, but because focus has consolidated. This is the practical neurological benefit of severance. Focus is not merely a motivational concept, it is a cognitive resource with measurable effects on performance quality. When that resource is concentrated rather than divided, the outputs it generates tend to be qualitatively superior. The work produced by a fully focused mind tends to carry a depth and a coherence that the work of a divided mind cannot consistently match. This is why some of the most significant creative and professional breakthroughs in any field tend to occur, not in periods of comfortable balance, but in periods of intense singular focus, periods where, by choice or by circumstance, the person had no viable alternative and was therefore required to bring everything they had to the problem in front of them. We should also address something that many people find genuinely difficult about the moment of severance, and that is the social dimension of the decision. Releasing a backup plan is rarely a purely private act. It almost always involves other people. People WO have opinions about your choices. People WO have their own investment in your security. People WO genuinely care about you and express that care. Through caution, family members WHO worry, friends question, advisors WHO counsel against what they perceive as unnecessary risk. These voices are not malicious. In most cases, they come from a place of genuine concern. But they carry a weight that can make the moment of severance feel like a betrayal of those WHO care for you, rather than an act of self-determination. Navigating this social dimension requires a specific kind of emotional maturity. It requires the ability to receive concern with genuine appreciation, while not allowing that concern to become the governing principle of your decision-making. It requires the ability to communicate your commitment clearly and respectfully, without defensiveness and without the need for immediate external validation. It requires the understanding that the people WHO love you are not always in the best position to assess what you are capable of, because their assessment is filtered through their own relationship with risk, their own experience of failure, and their own understanding of what safety means. Their caution is real, but it is not evidence of the limits of your potential. One of the most powerful things you can do in the social context of the moment of severance is to communicate your decision with the calm authority of someone who has already made peace with the choice, not with evangelistic fervor, not with defensive justification, but with the quiet certainty of a person who has examined their direction with rigor and chosen it fully. This tone of calm authority tends to shift the dynamic of the conversation more effectively than any argument you might construct. People respond to settled conviction differently than they respond to excited announcement. Settled conviction communicates that the decision has already been processed, that the objections have already been internally addressed, and that what is being shared is a conclusion, not a proposal, seeking approval. The moment of severance is also the moment where your relationship with failure fundamentally changes. not because failure becomes impossible, but because its meaning changes entirely. When plan B exists, failure on the primary path means activation of the backup, a known outcome with a known cost. When plan B has been released, failure on the primary path means something different. It means a need for adaptation, recalibration, and renewed effort. It means a problem to be solved within the context of the primary commitment, not a trigger for the transition to a secondary life. Failure, in the context of total commitment, becomes information rather than verdict. It becomes a teacher rather than a terminator. And this shift in the meaning of failure tends to change the relationship with risk in a way that is deeply liberating. When failure is information, you stop fearing it in the way that paralyzes. You begin to engage with it in the way that educates. You start to understand that every significant failure contains within it a specific lesson about the gap between your current capabilities and the demands of your objective. And that lesson, when extracted with clarity and applied with discipline, tends to close that gap more effectively than any period of uninterrupted success. The moment of severance is the beginning of this new relationship with your own journey. It is the point where you stop being a visitor to your own ambition and become its permanent resident, where you stop auditing the experience from a safe distance and begin living it from the inside. It is not a comfortable moment, but it is the most honest one available to you. And on the other side of it, the work finally begins in earnest. The discipline of the irreversible. There is a quality that separates people who sustain exceptional performance over long periods of time from those who experience it briefly and then retreat. It is not a quality of talent. It is not a quality of circumstance. It is a quality of relationship with their own decisions. The people who sustain exceptional performance have developed what might be called a discipline of the irreversible. They have learned to make decisions of a particular weight and then to live forward from those decisions with a consistency that does not bend to the fluctuating pressure of doubt, discomfort, or external opinion. They do not revisit the foundational decision every time conditions become difficult. They have separated the question of direction, which has been answered, from the question of execution, which is the ongoing work. And this separation is not a form of rigidity. It is a form of psychological efficiency that frees an enormous amount of cognitive and emotional energy for the actual demands of the journey. We need to examine this discipline with care because it is frequently misunderstood. The discipline of the irreversible is not the same as inflexibility. A person who is disciplined about the irreversibility of their foundational commitment is not a person who refuses to adapt their methods, their tactics, or their understanding of the landscape. On the contrary, they are often among the most adaptive people in any given field, precisely because they are not distracted by the question of whether to continue. All of their adaptive energy is directed toward how to continue most effectively given current conditions. The direction is fixed. The path within that direction is fluid, responsive, and continuously refined. This is the architecture of sustainable high performance, a stable core of committed direction surrounded by a highly adaptive operational layer. Think about this in terms of what it actually looks like in practice. A person who has made an irreversible commitment to building a particular kind of enterprise does not, when they encounter a significant market challenge, begin questioning whether they should have built a different kind of enterprise. They question their current strategy within the enterprise. They question their team composition. They question their timing, their positioning, their resource allocation. They bring every available tool of analysis and creativity to bear on the problem of how to advance within their chosen direction. But the direction itself is not on the table. It has been decided. And the psychological efficiency produced by that settled decision means that the full force of their intelligence is available for the tactical and strategic problems that genuinely require it. Compare this to the person who has not made the irreversible commitment. When they encounter the same market challenge, a portion of their cognitive response is directed not at solving the problem, but at evaluating the problem as potential evidence for a larger conclusion about their direction. They are running two processes simultaneously, solving the immediate problem and assessing whether the immediate problem is a reason to reconsider the foundational choice. This dual processing is not only inefficient, it tends to produce inferior solutions to the immediate problem because the mind that is partially engaged in strategic retreat cannot bring its full creative resources to strategic advance. The discipline of the irreversible, then, is about creating a clear internal boundary between the layer of your thinking that governs direction and the layer that governs execution. Direction is decided. Execution is continuously optimized. This boundary is not erected through emotional suppression or willful blindness. It is erected through a deliberate cognitive practice that begins with the recognition of what kind of question you are actually facing in any given moment. Is this a question about how to proceed? Or is it a question about whether to proceed? Questions about how are the proper domain of active problem solving. Questions about whether, when the foundational commitment has already been made with full clarity and genuine integrity, are most often not genuine strategic questions at all. They are emotional responses to difficulty, dressed in the language of strategic review. Learning to make this distinction in real time is one of the most valuable skills available to a committed person. It requires a level of self-awareness that is not automatic but is absolutely developable. It requires the practice of pausing in moments of significant difficulty or doubt and asking yourself with genuine honesty, is what I am feeling right now evidence of a fundamental problem with my direction, or is it the predictable emotional signature of sustained effort under pressure? In the vast majority of cases, when the initial commitment was made with genuine clarity and integrity, the answer to that question will be the latter. The difficulty is not evidence that the direction is wrong. It is evidence that the direction is real, that it is demanding something of you that has not yet been fully developed, and that the development is exactly what the difficulty is designed to produce. This leads us to one of the most important reframes available in the context of total commitment. Difficulty is not the enemy of progress. In most cases, it is the mechanism of progress. The human capacity for growth is not activated by ease. It is activated by the encounter with problems that exceed current capability. When you meet a problem that is larger than your current skill set, your mind is presented with a genuine developmental opportunity. It is being asked to expand. The discomfort you feel in that moment is the discomfort of expansion, the internal friction of a capability being stretched beyond its current boundary. If you retreat from that friction, the expansion does not occur. If you remain present with it and continue working within it, the expansion happens. And when it does, the problem that once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable, and then it begins to feel routine. And then you are ready for the next level of difficulty, which will produce the next level of expansion. This is the organic process of mastery, and it is only fully available to the person WHO has committed irreversibly to a direction. Because the person WO retains the exit door will often leave before the expansion completes. They will encounter the friction of the developmental edge and interpret it as the signal to retreat, just at the moment when their continued presence would have produced a significant and lasting increase in capability. The irreversible commitment is what keeps you at the developmental edge long enough for the real growth to occur. Now let us talk about the maintenance of the discipline of the irreversible over time, because this discipline is not established once and then automatically sustained. It requires active maintenance, particularly during the periods of extended difficulty that are an inevitable feature of any significant undertaking. The maintenance of this discipline rests on several specific practices that are worth examining in detail. The first is the practice of documented clarity. At the moment when your commitment is fresh and your reasoning is clear, take the time to write down, with specificity and depth, why you have chosen this direction, what you understand about its demands, what you have assessed about your own capacity to meet those demands, and what you anticipate the difficult periods will look like. This document is not a motivational exercise. It is a strategic resource. When the difficult period arrives, and it will arrive, this document provides you with access to the clarity of your best thinking at a moment when your current thinking may be distorted by fatigue, frustration, or doubt. It is a letter from the clearest version of yourself to the version of yourself that is currently under pressure, and its value in those moments is difficult to overstate. The second practice is the deliberate management of your information environment during periods of extended difficulty. The human mind is extraordinarily susceptible to the influence of its information environment. What you read, what you listen to, what conversations you engage in, and what perspectives you allow extended access to your thinking all shape the quality and direction of your cognitive processing. During difficult periods, there is a natural gravitational pull toward information that elevates the instinct to retreat. The story of someone WHO quit and found peace. The analysis that confirms the risks of your direction. The voice that says the most intelligent people know when to stop. This information is not necessarily false, but its selective consumption during moments of doubt tends to distort your assessment of your actual situation. deliberately seeking out during these periods the accounts of people who navigated comparable difficulties and continued, and the analytical frameworks that clarify what sustained effort tends to produce is not self-deception. It is the intelligent management of your own cognitive environment. The third practice is the cultivation of what might be called an accountability architecture. This is a deliberately constructed network of relationships and commitments that make the maintenance of your direction socially reinforced, not in the sense of external pressure to perform for others, but in the sense of having relationship with people who know your commitment, understand your direction, and are positioned to offer the kind of honest, grounded perspective that helps you distinguish genuine developmental difficulty from actual strategic misalignment. These are not yes people. They are people whose judgment you respect, whose own commitment to their directions you admire, and whose honest feedback you have invited as a standing feature of your relationship. They are the human infrastructure of your discipline. The fourth practice is the regular, deliberate celebration of process rather than exclusively of outcome. One of the significant psychological challenges of long-term irreversible commitment is the extended gap between the commitment and the visible results that confirm its wisdom. During this gap, the mind can lose access to the evidence that progress is occurring, because the evidence is often internal and incremental rather than external and dramatic, deliberately marking and acknowledging the process milestones. The skills developed, the problems solved, the capabilities expanded, the character qualities strengthened, maintains the psychological momentum that is necessary for sustained effort. It reminds you, in a concrete and honest way, that the investment is generating returns even when those returns are not yet visible in their final form. There is something profound that occurs when the discipline of the irreversible is maintained through a full cycle of difficulty and emergence. When you have stayed with your commitment through a period that genuinely tested it, when you have met the doubt, the fatigue, the external skepticism, and the internal pressure to retreat, and you have continued, something changes in your relationship with your own capacity. The experience of having remained becomes evidence of a kind that cannot be externally provided or theoretically constructed. It is experiential evidence. It is the knowledge, held in your body as well as your mind, that you are the kind of person who continues. That when the pressure peaks and the exit is visible and the rational arguments for leaving are available, you have the internal resources to remain and to work and to grow. This knowledge is cumulative. Each cycle of difficulty navigated and survived deepens it. Each developmental edge reached and crossed extends it. Over time, the person who maintains the discipline of the irreversible builds a self-concept that is qualitatively different from the person who has always had an exit available. They carry the lived evidence of their own resilience, and that evidence is the most stable foundation for continued commitment that exists, because it cannot be taken from them. It cannot be argued away. It cannot be dissolved by a bad quarter or a critical review or a moment of public difficulty. It is theirs, earned through the specific and irreplaceable experience of having stayed when leaving was available. That is the discipline of the irreversible, and it is built one difficult day at a time. The identity of the fully committed. Every significant transformation in human performance begins not with a new strategy but with a new story. Not a fabricated story, not a wishful story constructed to paper over the cracks of an unconvincing present, but a genuinely new story about who you are. That is grounded in the decisions you have made, the commitments you have honored, and the evidence you have accumulated through the sustained practice of showing up for your primary direction with everything you have. Identity is not a fixed object that you either have or do not have. It is a living structure continuously shaped by the interpretations you place on your own behavior and continuously reinforced by the behaviors those interpretations generate. When you understand identity as a dynamic, malleable, and self-reinforcing system, you begin to understand why the decision to become a fully committed person is not merely a decision about what you will do. It is a decision about who you will be. And that decision, when made with genuine depth and expressed through consistent action, tends to reorganize everything else. We have spent considerable time in this journey examining the psychological mechanics of commitment, the costs of division, the architecture of total investment, the discipline required to maintain an irreversible direction through the inevitable pressures of difficulty and doubt. Now we arrive at the deepest layer of this conversation. We arrive at the question of identity, because all of the strategies, all of the frameworks, all of the practices we have discussed are ultimately in service of a single transformation, the transformation from a person who is attempting Something significant to a person Dutch is that significance in progress. From someone WO is trying to be exceptional to someone WO understands themselves as a person on an exceptional path, and whose daily behavior reflects that understanding with remarkable consistency. This is not arrogance. The identity of the fully committed is not characterized by an inflated sense of superiority over others. It is characterized by a deep, quiet certainty about the direction of one's own life.
A certainty that does not require external validation because it is grounded in internal evidence.
A certainty that does not dismiss others because it is too occupied with the demands of its own trajectory to spend energy on comparison. The fully committed person tends to be simultaneously more focused on their own path and more genuinely interested in the paths of others because they have resolved the internal competition for their own attention. They are not using the comparison of themselves to others as a substitute for clarity about themselves. They already have clarity about themselves, and from that clarity, a genuine curiosity about other humans becomes possible. Let us examine what the identity of the fully committed actually looks like in the texture of daily life, because identity is not an abstract concept. It is expressed in the specific, concrete, moment-to-moment choices that constitute a human life. The identity of the fully committed person is visible in the way they begin their mornings, not with the frantic energy of someone trying to outrun their own doubt, but with the settled purposefulness of someone who knows where they are going and is genuinely glad to be moving toward it. It is visible in the way they respond to setbacks, not with the destabilized panic of someone whose entire self-concept is dependent on uninterrupted success, but with the calibrated attention of someone who understands that setbacks are navigational information rather than existential verdicts. It is visible in the way they communicate about their work. The fully committed person speaks about their direction with a specificity and a groundedness that is qualitatively different from the aspirational language of the partially committed. They do not say, "I am hoping to build something significant someday." They say, "This is what I am building, this is where it currently stands, and this is what I am working on right now." The difference in language reflects a difference in psychological position. One position is observational, watching from a distance to see if the dream will materialize. The other is operational, inside the work, directing it, learning from it, and fully identified with it as a current reality rather than a future possibility. This operational identity has a specific effect on the people who encounter it. When you speak from inside your commitment rather than from outside it, the quality of attention you receive from others changes. The conversations become more substantive. The questions become more engaged. The relationships that form around your work tend to attract people who are themselves operationally committed to their own directions, which tends to create the kind of professional and personal ecosystem that accelerates progress for everyone within it. Identity, expressed through language and behavior, is one of the most powerful environmental design tools available to a committed person. By showing up as someone who is fully inside their work, you actively shape the environment around you in ways that support your continued progress. Now let us address something that often goes unexamined in conversations about commitment and identity. The fully committed person is not a person without fear. They are not a person who has achieved a state of permanent emotional equanimity where doubt and uncertainty no longer arise. Fear, uncertainty, and self-questioning are universal features of the human experience of significant undertaking. They do not disappear with commitment. What changes is the relationship with them. The person who has built the identity of the fully committed experience fear as a companion on the journey rather than as a gatekeeper. Who must be placated before the journey can continue. They have learned, through the accumulated experience of moving through fear, rather than waiting for its absence, that action taken in the presence of fear is not reckless, it is courageous. And courage, practiced consistently, tends to become the default mode of operation, rather than the exceptional act it once required. This is an important reframe for anyone has been waiting to feel ready before taking the irreversible steps that their commitment demands. The feeling of readiness is not the prerequisite for action. In most cases, the feeling of readiness is the product of action. You do not feel ready and then begin. You begin, and through the beginning, through the accumulation of experience, capability, and evidence of your own ability to navigate difficulty, you develop the feeling of readiness retrospectively. The identity of the fully committed is built not by waiting until you feel like that person, but by consistently acting like that person while the feelings catch up. There is also a dimension of the fully committed identity that relates specifically to the quality of attention you bring to your work. When your identity is integrated with your direction, your engagement with the work changes in a way that has profound practical consequences. You begin to notice things that previously passed beneath your threshold of attention. Patterns in your field that were always present but invisible to a partially engaged observer. Opportunities embedded in difficulties that only reveal themselves to a mind that is fully present in the problem space. Connections between disparate elements of your work that generate insights unavailable to someone who is managing their involvement from a careful distance. Full identity integration produces a quality of attention that might be described as intimate familiarity, the kind of deep knowing that only comes from having been fully present in a domain for a sustained period with no part of yourself held back. This intimate familiarity is one of the distinguishing characteristics of genuine mastery. The master practitioner in any field is not simply someone who has accumulated more information than others. They are someone whose extended full engagement with a domain has produced a quality of perception that is qualitatively different. They see the field from the inside. They feel its rhythms, its patterns, and its possibilities in a way that is difficult to articulate but immediately recognizable when encountered. This quality of perception is not a gift. It is the natural result of sustained, fully committed engagement over time, and it is available to anyone who is willing to make the identity investment that produces it. We should also address the relationship between the fully committed identity and the people around you. Specifically, the people who are in the early stages of their own journeys and who are watching how you navigate yours. Whether you are aware of it or not, your commitment has a modeling effect. The people who observe you, colleagues, younger professionals, people in your personal life who are wrestling with their own commitment, decisions, are drawing conclusions from your behavior about what is possible and what commitment actually looks like in practice. When you show up with the settled authority of the fully committed, you are not simply advancing your own trajectory. You are expanding the conception of what is possible for the people who are close enough to observe you doing it. This is not about performing commitment for an audience. It is about understanding that genuine commitment, expressed authentically through consistent behavior, has a ripple effect that extends beyond the individual. The person who burns their plan B and commits fully to their direction does not only change their own life. They change the informational environment of everyone who is close enough to witness the change. They become evidence, living, observable, concrete evidence, that total commitment is a real option. That it is not just an inspirational concept but an actual way of moving through the world, with real consequences and real rewards. Let us now bring this section to its essential conclusion by addressing the question that underlies everything we have discussed. The question is not whether you are capable of the fully committed identity. The evidence of human history, across every domain of significant achievement, suggests that the capacity for total commitment is a broadly distributed human capability. The question is whether you are willing to accept the responsibility that comes with it. Because the fully committed identity carries a weight that the partially committed identity does not. It carries the weight of full ownership. When things go well, the credit belongs to you in a complete way. When things go poorly, the responsibility is also yours in a complete way. There is no backup plan to absorb a portion of the accountability. There is no secondary path to dilute the meaning of the primary result. This full ownership is not a burden to be feared. It is the fundamental condition for a life that is genuinely yours. When you own your direction completely, when the success and the difficulty and the learning and the growth are all unambiguously the product of your choices and your effort, you inhabit your own life in a way that is simply not available to the person who is managing their existence from behind the shield of contingency. You become the author of your experience rather than its observer. And the authority that comes from full authorship is the deepest form of freedom available to a human being. The identity of the fully committed is the identity of a person who has chosen with clear eyes and a steady heart to find out exactly what they are capable of, not by removing all difficulty, not by guaranteeing all outcomes, but by placing themselves fully in the arena of their chosen direction and refusing to leave until the work is done. That is who you are becoming, not someday, now. With every choice that reflects your commitment, with every morning that begins inside your work rather than outside it, with every difficulty navigated rather than fled, you are building the identity that will carry you to the outcomes you have chosen as worthy of your one life. The door behind you is closed, the path ahead is clear, and you are already walking it. The life on the other side there is a version of your life that exists on the other side of total commitment. Not a perfect life, Not a life without difficulty, without setback, without the ordinary and extraordinary challenges that are the universal inheritance of every human being. WHO attempts something meaningful, but a life that is unmistakably yours, a life that carries the specific texture of a person. WHO chose their direction with clarity, released the infrastructure of their retreat with courage, and walked forward with the kind of settled authority that only comes from having made peace with the full weight of their own chosen path. This life is not a fantasy. It is not a motivational abstraction designed to temporarily elevate your mood before the ordinary gravity of your circumstances pulls you back to where you started. It is a genuinely available outcome, and its availability is not determined by your talent, your background, your resources, or the particular circumstances of your current situation. It is determined, more than by any other single factor, by the quality and the completeness of your commitment. We have traveled a significant distance together in this conversation. We began by examining the psychology of the exit door, the ancient survival mechanism that scans every room for a way out and files that information away against the possibility of future discomfort. We looked at how the presence of that exit, while it feels like safety, actually functions as a continuous drain on the cognitive and emotional resources that exceptional performance requires. We examined the architecture of total commitment, the 4 pillars of clarity, resource alignment, behavioral consistency, and identity integration that together form the structural foundation of a life directed with full intention. We calculated the real cost of keeping the backup plan active, not in dramatic terms, but in the precise, honest currency of divided attention, degraded decision-making, emotional tension, and the slow erosion of self-belief that accumulates when you spend years maintaining an alternative to your primary vision. We explored the moment of severance, that specific, often private, always significant point where the release of Plan B moves from internal intention to external reality. We examined what that moment requires, what it produces, and how the clarity that emerges on its far side tends to reorganize the entire landscape of the person's thinking and perception. We looked at the discipline of the irreversible, the ongoing practice of maintaining a settled foundational commitment while bringing full adaptive flexibility to the tactical and strategic demands of execution, and we arrived at the deepest layer of this conversation, the identity of the fully committed person, the understanding that total commitment is not merely a behavioral strategy, but a fundamental reorganization of WA you understand yourself to be, expressed in the texture of your daily choices and radiating outward into every relationship, every conversation, and every room you enter. Now we arrive at the question that gives everything we have discussed its ultimate meaning. The question is not what you now know. Knowledge without application is an interesting possession that produces no change in the actual conditions of your life. The question is what you are going to do with what you now know. What specific, concrete, irreversible action are you prepared to take, not in some future moment of ideal readiness, but in the near and honest proximity of your actual present life, that will begin the process of sealing the exit and orienting your full self toward the direction you have chosen. This is the question that separates the person has been deeply engaged by this conversation from the person WHO is genuinely transformed by it. Engagement is valuable. It is the beginning of the process. But transformation requires that the engagement become embodied, that the understanding moves from the level of intellectual appreciation to the level of behavioral expression, that it changes not just what you think about your commitment, but what you actually do with your morning, your resource, your conversations, and your choices. The life on the other side of total commitment has several qualities that are worth describing with specificity, because specificity tends to make possibility more real to the human mind than abstraction does. One of the most consistent qualities reported by people WHO have made the transition from partial to total commitment is a profound reduction in the low-grade anxiety that characterizes the state of managed contingency. This reduction is not the result of external conditions having improved. In many cases, the external conditions immediately following the moment of severance are more demanding and more uncertain than they were before. The reduction in anxiety comes from the internal resolution of an unresolved question. The question of whether you are truly committed has been answered, and the answering of it, even in the face of increased external demands, produces a quality of psychological peace that is qualitatively different from the brittle comfort of the maintained backup plan. Another consistent quality of the life on the other side is a deepened sense of engagement with the work itself. When the exit is sealed and the full weight of your identity is aligned with your direction, the work stops being something you are doing and becomes something you are living. The boundary between professional effort and personal meaning becomes permeable in a way that is genuinely energizing rather than exhausting. You are not working harder in the sense of increased hours or increased strain. You are working deeper, with a quality of presence and investment that produces results of a different order than the results of careful, managed involvement. There is also a transformation in the quality of your relationships. When you are no longer divided, when the person WO shows up in your personal relationships is the same person WO is fully committed in your professional direction rather than a version of yourself that is managing the gap between the two. The depth of connection available in those relationships increases significantly. People WO are close to you begin to experience you as more present, more honest, and more genuinely engaged. Not because you are trying harder to be present, but because the internal division that was consuming a portion of your presence has been resolved. You have more of yourself available for the people WHO matter to you, because you are no longer spending that self on the maintenance of a contingency you no longer believe in. And perhaps most significantly, the life on the other side of total commitment tends to generate a quality of self-knowledge that is available through no other path. When you have placed yourself fully in the arena of your chosen direction, when you have met the difficulty, the doubt, the periods of invisible progress, and the genuine tests of your character that significant undertaking inevitably produces, you learn things about yourself that cannot be learned in any other way. You learn the actual shape of your resilience. You learn the specific form that your creativity takes under genuine pressure. You learn which of your values are deep enough to sustain you when the surface-level motivations have been stripped away by difficulty. You learn, in the most concrete and irreversible ways possible, that you are capable of more than you believed when you were still standing by the exit door. This self-knowledge is the most durable return on the investment of total commitment. External achievements can fluctuate, markets change, industries evolve. The specific outcomes that your commitment produces may look different from what you originally envisioned, and in many cases, they will be richer and more complex than what you were able to imagine from the beginning. But the self-knowledge, the lived, embodied, evidence-based understanding of what you are made of, is permanent. It travels with you. It informs every subsequent decision. It provides the foundation for every subsequent commitment, and it accumulates, cycle by cycle, into a life story that is genuinely yours. A story of a person WHO chose and meant it and showed up for it and found out what that choosing produced. There are practical things you can do today, not tomorrow, not when the circumstances feel more favorable, but today, to begin the movement toward this life. You can identify with honest specificity the backup plan that has been consuming the resources of your primary commitment. Name it, write it down. Look at it clearly and without judgment, recognizing it for what it is, not a sign of your weakness, but a sign of your humanity. Everyone has built one. The question is not whether you have one. The question is whether you are ready to release it. You can identify the single most significant action that would make that release real and tangible in your actual circumstances. Not the most dramatic action, not the most frightening one, but the most honest one. The action that, when taken, will change your actual situation in a way that reflects the internal decision you have made. This action will be specific to your life. It will require a degree of courage that is proportional to the degree of commitment it represents. And it will produce in its wake the clarity and the momentum that make the next action easier and the next one easier still. You can begin today to speak about your direction in the language of the fully committed rather than the language of the cautiously exploring. Not with false certainty about outcomes, but with genuine certainty about your direction and your investment in it. Notice how that language feels in your mouth. Notice how people respond to it. Notice what it does to your own sense of the reality and the proximity of your objectives. You can begin today to audit your resource allocation with the honest eye of someone who is genuinely committed to a single primary direction. Where is your time actually going? Where is your attention actually landing? Where is your financial decision-making actually pointing? And where does the gap between stated commitment and actual resource flow most need to be closed? These are not large, dramatic gestures. They are the quiet, powerful, daily expressions of a decision that has already been made at the level of identity. They are the behavioral infrastructure of the fully committed life, built one honest choice at a time. We began this conversation by asking you to imagine the lightness of having only one direction, to feel what it might be like to be a mind that is no longer divided, a person WO is no longer measuring the distance to the exit, a self that is fully inside its own chosen trajectory. that imagining was the beginning of the process. But imagining is not arriving. And arriving requires the one thing that no conversation, no book, no framework, and no mentor can provide for you. It requires your choice, made clearly, made completely, made with the full understanding of what it costs and what it produces and what it means about who you are. The backup plan is heavy. You have been carrying it for longer than you realize, and the moment you set it down, not in defeat, not in desperation, but in the clear-eyed recognition that it has been the most expensive item in your possession, you will feel something shift. A weight lifted, a direction clarified, a self finally, fully present in its own life. That is the life on the other side. It has been waiting for you, not with impatience, not with judgment about how long it has taken you to arrive, simply waiting with the quiet certainty of something that has always known you were coming. All you have to do is burn the plan that was keeping you from it, and walk forward without looking back.